Welcome, third graders, to our lesson today on plant responses. Remember, we have been learning about how does a plant respond to its environment. So we've learned about how a plant responds to light by growing towards the light in order to get the solar energy to make its food. We learned how a plant responds to gravity by its roots growing down towards the pull of gravity and the stem growing away from the pull of gravity. And today we're going to talk about temperature. How does a plant respond to temperature? So I am on page 78 in my reading packet, 78 on the temperature section. And I'm on page 87 in my questions packet. Let's go ahead and get started by answering those before and after true false questions. So we're in the before box because we haven't learned yet. And go ahead and fill in your thoughts on the true false statements. So statement number 1 says, plants respond to cold weather by hibernating. Do you think that's true or false? Plants respond to cold weather by hibernating. Statement number 2 says, an apple tree will make more fruit if it does not get any cold weather. Is that true or false? An apple tree will make more fruit if it does not get any cold weather. And our last statement says, some kinds of plants only release their seeds after a forest fire. Do you think that one is true or false? Some kinds of plants only release their seeds after a forest fire. All right, you should have your 3 true or false statements completed. And let's go ahead and talk about how does temperature affect a plant. Plants respond to changes in the temperature. When the weather gets colder, some plants become dormant. Dormant means they are not active. When a plant is dormant, it is still alive. It is living off of the energy it has stored. The plant is not growing or making food, but it is still alive. Okay, so stop and think about that. Dormant means it's not active, meaning it's not making food or growing, but it's still alive. A plant overmakes food, stores that food, and then lives off of it during that dormant stage. For example, some kinds of trees lose their leaves when the weather gets cold. In the fall, we see this happen. They stop making food through photosynthesis because they don't have leaves anymore and live off the sugar or their food stored in their trunk. When the temperature gets warmer, new leaves will appear on the tree and it will start making food again. So here is a picture of a maple tree in its dormant stage. You can see there's no leaves on this tree, so therefore it's not making food, but it's still alive. It's just hanging out. And then as the warmer weather starts to produce, you can see the little leaves here are starting to emerge. And here is a picture as it gets even warmer. And then it will have all those leaves through the summer and spring and be able to produce its food so that it can survive through the dormant winter again. Here is another picture of that same maple tree with its leaves growing. After they become dormant, some kinds of plants need a long period of cold temperature followed by a certain amount of warm weather before they will start to grow again. So some plants need to be in that cold and then warm up. If an apple tree or peach tree doesn't get enough hours of cold weather, the flower buds might not open at all in the spring. So that's one of our statements that we filled out. If an apple tree does not get enough cold, it may not bud in the spring. Okay, so it has to have cold weather. Some kinds of apple trees, for instance, need to have 1,000 hours of cold weather in order to make fruit. So here is a picture of some apple blossoms, and they are just beginning to open after their cold weather. The blossoms are the flowers. Remember, a flower makes seeds, and the seeds have a fruit that grows around them. So this is the flower that's getting ready to make the seeds. These blossoms will not open unless they had enough cold weather. Here is the picture of the apples growing around the seeds because the blossom was able to open. Remember that fruit forms around a pollinated flower in order to protect the seeds. The spot at the bottom of the apple is where the blossom was attached to it. Some kinds of plants require the high temperatures of a fire to begin their life cycle. So the opposite, they need heat. Some kinds of cones only open and release their seeds in response to a fire. The cones on a jack pine are covered with a sticky resin that must be melted for the cone to open and release its seeds. So it's got a sticky substance that has to basically be heated up and melted like you would melt chocolate or butter, and then the cone opens and releases the seeds. Without a fire, the seeds would never be released. After the seeds fall to the forest floor, they germinate very quickly. So here is a picture of a cone of a jack pine. Look how closed up the scales are of this cone versus some of the ones we've looked at. They're very tight, they're hard, they're almost like they're glued shut on the outside, and they just hang out like that. Here are the same cones after a fire. So notice that the outside of the cone is burnt and black, but the inside, and you can see in here, did not get touched by the fire. It melted that resin, the cone opened, and the seeds were released. Here is another picture of cones that have opened after a fire. You can see in the background that bare burned ground. You can see the brown dried needles, and now you can see the inside of the cone, which is still that dark brown and was not affected by the fire. After our lesson today, you're going to watch a video about the giant sequoia trees and how they need the fire to grow. Later on, we're going to read about touch and how it responds. Let's review how a plant responds to temperature. Remember, cold temperatures cause a plant to become dormant or inactive. They do not grow their leaves and make food, therefore they have to use the stored food in their trunks to get through the winter. Some plants need a certain amount of cold weather, like the apple tree, before its bud will open. So if it does not get enough cold weather, it won't make its fruit. Remember also, some plants need fire to open and release their seeds. All right, I will see you next time for our lesson on touch.